Andy Ellwood, How to be a good boundary breaker. Technology troubadour and wartime consigliere, egresado de la Universidad de Texas A&M. Andy Ellwood rápidamente aprendió sobre el mundo de las ventas, iniciando su carrera con la venta de seguros de vida, pasando por la venta de aviones privados por Warren Buffett. Aprovechó sus capacidades desarrollando negocios y alianzas para Gowalla durante su adquisición por Facebook y para Waze por Google, hasta llegar actualmente como presidente de Basket. Con su conferencia How to be a good boundary breaker, Andy nos enseña a cómo salirnos de lo convencional y tener una mayor generación de ideas. Demos la bienvenida a Andy Ellwood.
Buenos dias. Is this thing on? Can you guys hear me okay? Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. All right, very good. Awesome. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. It is a true privilege to get the opportunity to share a little bit of my story and stand next to an almost life-size photo of myself. The reason why I wanted to start off with this slide is just to confirm that I am, in fact, Andy Ellwood, so you can make sure that you know that that's happening. But then also to point out that when I give a talk, I think it's always kind and always I do my best to let people know how I think and how I speak. And because I've been raised on the internet, I think and I speak in 140 characters at a time. So I live on Twitter. This is my Twitter handle here. And during today's talk, I want to hear what questions you have. I want to hear what things that we're talking about that resonate with you. So if you have a question that you would like me to answer either at the end during our Q&A session or later once I get to my laptop, I think probably tomorrow, feel free to just tweet at me and use the hashtag boundary breaker. And so with that, I just kind of want to dive right in. Is it okay if I step off the stage? Is that all right? Okay, awesome. This is better. So when I was thinking about boundary breaker, when I was thinking about the theme of this and thinking through even just everyone being here broke some sort of boundary, changed some sort of part of their routine, mixed it up just a little bit to come and to do something that is hopefully going to make you better at what you're doing. And that's really just even taking the step to go find places where you can have those type of conversations and learn from other folks is a huge step in the right direction and something that I commend all of you for. And when I think back on the boundaries that I have broken for myself, it's been really interesting to kind of think through the different pieces of the puzzle and the parts and the moments in my life where things changed, where there was a breakthrough. Very flattering video to start. It's always nice when you can throw Warren Buffett's name into your bio. It adds a little bit of credibility. Throw in Google, things along those lines. But I wanted to start off with a very specific moment that I look back on as maybe one of the most important boundaries that I ever broke. When I was in my mid-20s, I was working for Warren Buffett's private jet company. It's called NetJets. And they had a specific program called Marquee Jet, where you could buy access to the planes without having to purchase the entire aircraft. And it was specifically created for people who maybe were not going to be rich for forever, but they were rich right now. So athletes, rappers, superstars, celebrities. And they needed to be able to fly for the specific things that they were flying to without having to go through customs, without having to go through the traditional TSA approvals. But it wasn't something where it was going to be for forever. So as a result, my job was to cold call billionaires, athletes, and celebrities, and that's a pretty fun way to spend your 20s. Picking up the phone, trying to get the cell phone numbers of these people that you see on the news every night. And it's a very big challenge, but it was fancy. It was fun. And so I get a phone call from my boss, and he says, "Andy, I have bad news." And I was on a roll that week. I was like, no, there's no bad news this week. Only good news this week. He goes, "I have bad news. Something's come up, and I can't go to the Super Bowl this weekend. So you're going to have to cancel your plans and go to all the parties instead." And I kind of I paused for a second, and I said, "How is that bad news?" That sounds like great news. And he says, no, like, I'm sure you had other things going on this weekend. I know you were planning to host your own Super Bowl party, but we need you to get to Phoenix, Arizona by tomorrow. Do you think you can do it? I was like, yes, sir. I will do my best, right? So cancel my weekend plans, book my flights. I'm pretty excited, go out and have a margarita or 3 with some friends celebrating the fact that I get to go to the Super Bowl. And, but I'm like, okay, I gotta get up early tomorrow, gotta go run some errands, gotta make sure I have everything that I need to go to, the Sports Illustrated party, the ESPN party, our party that we were hosting. And so it was, all the names that were on the list, I was like, this is great. Wake up the next morning, take a shower, get ready, start to pack my bag, and I walk outside to where I'd parked my car, and my car is not there. Now, at this time I was living in Dallas, Texas, and I lived in a gated apartment community with a security guard. So I'm like, all right, okay, fine. And so I knock on my roommate's door. I'm like, hey, did you borrow the car last night? Because sometimes, like, it was a good parking space, so maybe he took it and then parked it somewhere else. He goes, no, like, I just stayed home all night. I was like, oh my gosh, somebody stole my car. This is horrible. So I proceed to call the cops, tell them the story, explain to them what happened, and they say, hold on, Mr. Ellwood, we need to check on something. So they come back on the phone and they say, Mr. Ellwood, nobody stole your car. I was like, well, then where is it? They're like, the bank took it because you're 4 months late on your car payment. And I was like, what? No way. And when I went back and I checked my records, and I had literally just forgotten to mail the check. Checks were in the envelope with stamps on them, and I'd literally just forgot to put them in the mail. And so here I am, about to go shake hands with celebrities, hang out with rich people, go to all the right parties, be like the coolest 26-year-old ever, and I don't have a car. And that's pretty embarrassing. So obviously I couldn't tell anyone, right? But I had to basically wrestle with this fact that I was then gonna have to take a taxi to the airport, go spend a weekend pretending like I was some kind of success. I was the young guy in the room who was doing cool things, knowing that when I got home, I had a pretty bad situation that I had to go home to. And it was on the flight to the Super Bowl and back that I really realized that one of the boundaries that I had inadvertently set up for myself was that I wasn't taking care of the little things. I was leaving the little things to fall away because I was so excited about the big things. And in life, there are so many things that we don't have control over. We don't have control over most things, actually. But the things that we do have control over can very easily trip us up if we don't pay attention to them, if we don't focus on them, if we don't just put systems in place to make the simple things simple. There's enough complicated things out there that if something can be simple, find ways to set it up and just make it as simple as possible. For example, you may notice that in the photo that you saw of me earlier, in some of the videos that you saw of me earlier, and standing here right now, I'm wearing the exact same thing. Because I figured getting dressed is something that's pretty simple. It doesn't need to be that complicated. So I wear cowboy boots, jeans, button-down shirt, pocket square, and jacket almost every day. So all I do when I wake up in the morning is I grab a pocket square, decide which jacket it matches, decide what shirt it matches, and put on jeans and boots. Because it's simple, and then I don't have to think about it. For me, that's just something very boring that I just do. And then recently, fashion magazines have come out and said that successful people do that. So, we'll pretend like that's true. Mark Zuckerberg wears the same gray T-shirt every day. Steve Jobs used to wear the same black turtleneck. And I was like, this is great. I think I figured it out. But thinking through those processes and thinking through ways that you can streamline things that should be simple, right? When I meet with people, actually one of my business partners, he calls it the kitchen theory, that if he ever comes over to your apartment and sees you have dishes in your sink, he won't invest in your company. If you don't do your dishes, what else are you leaving to go to waste? When it's very simple, you just wash the dish and put it in the dishwasher, or wash the dish and put it back on the rack. If you can't do the simple things, why should we trust you to do the complicated things? And so that's just kind of one of the first things, the boundary of the things that you can control is one of the first things that I was thinking about when I was thinking about the theme for this week. Now let me rewind a little bit, if that's okay, as to how I got to selling private jets for Warren Buffett. My parents gave me a great gift. They told me that I could do anything that I wanted, and I believed them. They raised me with an overdeveloped sense of self-esteem that basically if I said, I'm gonna go do this, they said, great. And then when I did it for a little while, and then I figured out whether I liked it or not, I didn't, they supported me in that. And I've come from a long line of tall, bearded sales guys. My grandfather was one, my uncle was one, and now I'm the third generation, you could say. And so my first job was when I was 12 years old. I decided I was pretty good at mowing grass. I enjoyed mowing my parents' lawn, so I asked the neighbor if they wanted me to mow their lawn. They said yes, and eventually I was starting to mow quite a few lawns. I didn't realize that there was some additional responsibilities that came with being good at selling people the fact that you should mow their lawn. So I ended up having to pay taxes that year. So I've been paying taxes since I was 12 years old. I hired my first employee when I was 15, and it's fun. We ran this business, Reliable Lawn Care. When I graduated from high school, I went to Texas A&M University to study finance. I was like, well, what should I do with this company? So I gave it to my brother, and my dad said, no, you can't give it to your brother. You have to sell it to your brother. So my brother bought the lawn mowing business from me. And so while I was a freshman in college, I was still getting checks for my brother for the company, and it was a blast. And so it was a good early lesson about if you build something of value, make sure that you get some value out of it for as long as possible. He then sold it to our youngest brother. So the first company that I ever started lasted for 19 years. Reliable Lawn Care, the Ellwood brothers in Dallas, Texas. There are some lawns that we mowed for all 19 years, which is pretty fun to look back on. And still to this day, when I go home to my parents' house in Dallas, my dad won't mow the lawn for like a week or 2 weeks because he knows that I want to. And I still really enjoy that process and think back to the early days of kind of the entrepreneurial side of things. And what was funny is looking back on that, as a 12-year-old, 14-year-old, 15-year-old, I would walk up and I would knock on doors and I'd say, hi, my name's Andy Ellwood. I'm with Reliable Lawn Care. I'm gonna be mowing your yard this summer. I was curious if you'd like me to do it on Tuesdays or Thursdays. And they'd be like, you're gonna mow my lawn this summer? I was like, yes, you don't want to. And they're like, you're right, I don't. And looking back on it, after I got a little bit more formally trained in sales and how all that played out, I realized that was the assumed close, where you just kind of assume it's going to happen and see if they can kind of convince you otherwise. And so understanding that I really enjoyed people, that I really enjoyed making money, and that I really enjoyed providing a service where I could see the value, right? When mowing a lawn, you can see the part that's been cut and the part that hasn't been cut. Knowing that whatever I'm doing, I can actually see the value in it, I started to kind of pursue my career in finance. So while I was at Texas A&M University, Texas A&M is the largest landmass school in the United States. It started off as a land grant from the government. And so to get from one side of campus to the other, it takes a little while. So there's a bus route system that runs. And so when I was in college, I became a bus driver. Big, huge, like the monster buses that you see rolling around the city. A very fun way to meet a lot of people on campus was being the bus driver guy. And as I was driving, I was like, I don't want to be a bus driver forever, so maybe I should kind of step it up and see if I can get a better job. So I asked my parents at Christmas, I said, I think I'm going to go on some job interviews. I need a new suit. What I didn't tell them was I actually had this girl who I thought was going to take me to her sorority formal, and so I needed the new suit for that. But I figured it would be an okay thing maybe for both, right? Ended up, I didn't get invited to the sorority formal. Sad day. But I was driving the bus wearing my suit on interview day, just in case anybody needed advice or wanted to talk about business. So I went and I said, hey, I'm a sophomore. I realized I haven't even taken an upper level finance course yet. Are you guys hiring? To a lot of different people in the booth. I said, we only hire juniors and seniors. And I said, that's okay. I'm going to be a junior next year. What are the questions that I should know today that I can practice for the next year, so that when I come back as a junior, you're just going to say yes as soon as I walk up? And they said, nobody's ever asked us that. I said, great, so can I have the job this year? And one of the firms said yes. And that firm was a firm called Northwestern Mutual Financial Network. And Northwestern Mutual was ranked as one of the top 10 internships in the nation, right in between the White House and MTV. And so I was like, oh my gosh, they said yes, this is great. What I later realized was it didn't pay anything, it was 100% commission, and you were selling life insurance. And 100% commission is a pretty scary thing to do, but if you're good at it, you can make a lot of money. And so I said, hey, you know what, we'll try it this summer, and I ended up doing pretty well, and then I did it again the next summer, and I did it again the next summer. And so by the time I graduated, I already had 50 clients. And so kind of rolled right into that business where I was going out and meeting with people, talking to them about their financial future, and then helping them figure out like what the best plan was. And it was sales, but it was consultative sales. I was listening to people, understanding their situation, and coming back with the right way to present something that could actually solve the problem that they had presented to me. And so, being a competitive person, they told me how to win. They said, look, if you will be smart enough to be dumb enough to do exactly what we tell you to do for your first year in the business, we're going to set you up pretty well. We're going to set you up in a way that you can succeed for a long time. So I said, okay, I will listen to your advice. And so they said, look, if this is the number that you want to hit for the year, then this is how many meetings you need to go on, this is how many new contacts you need to make, and this is how many leads you need to generate, how many referrals you need to get. I said, okay, that sounds fair. And so I followed it to the T, but I set the big number as a number that was a little bit more aggressive than they thought I should. But the reason I set that number was because if I got that number, I would be the #1 sales guy in America amongst my peers. And I figured that seems like a good goal. Why would I not do that? And so that, in kind of understanding that those numbers, which we'll talk about a little bit later, it was something that I could control, right? I figured out which part of the sales process I could take ownership of, and then I maximized my work against that part of the sales funnel. And as a result, ended up being #1 in the US my first year out of school, which was a fun thing to do. And it came with a little bit more scrutiny, it came with a little bit more eyeballs, it came with a little bit more people having expectations. But one of the things that I learned then, and I've continued to see throughout my career, is that when you're good at something, you have to tell other people about it. But when you're great at something, other people will talk about it for you. And that's really, for me, has been the difference between companies and individuals that I've come across, is when somebody feels the need to tell you how good they are at something, that just means they're good at it, right? But if somebody doesn't feel the need to convince you that they're the best, they probably actually might be. And you can see it by the other people around them talking about it on their behalf. And so as a result, a lot of doors started to open up because I had achieved, kind of hit these early milestones in my career. And in that process of kind of learning which part of the sales funnel I could control, and then starting to have other people talk about what I was doing and how it kind of fit into maybe other businesses, right? Other places. I got the phone call from a friend of mine who was selling luxury homes and also then private jets. And he said, look, we need somebody in Dallas to take over the Dallas sales territory. I think you should interview for the job. So fly to New York City, going to big, huge, fancy, shiny office buildings with very aggressive sales people in very shiny suits, and interview for the job selling private jets for Warren Buffett. And they said, look, you're great, but we only hire people with 15 years of sales experience. And I said, okay. So I'm 26 right now. I started my first company when I was 12, so next year you'll hire me. And they said, wait, why? I was like, because I've been selling since I was 12 years old. Like, this seems to make sense to me. And then they did. They actually hired me the next year to take over Dallas. And it was, I had to prove myself a little bit more, right? Because I knew I was going up against guys who were 40, 45 that had been selling the jets for somebody else. They knew everything about the industry. They already had all the contacts. So I knew I had to go above and beyond. And so I found different ways throughout that year to make sure that I stayed on their mind, right? I knew that that's the job I wanted, but I found different ways to make sure that when the next time that job came open, there was no question in their mind that it was going to happen. So if I saw that the CEO was giving a talk at a conference in San Francisco, I would send him a care package to the hotel. If I saw that something big happened for one of their clients, I would write a blog post about it and like tweet it out and put it in social media so that they would be like, wait, we just got a press hit from who? Andy? Andy's not press. Just different ways to kind of drip on them to make sure that when the time came for me to be there, that it was a very quick phone call. They're like, hey Andy, job's yours, hurry up and get here, right? And so that's basically what happened, was by the time it was all said and done, walked in, back, same people, same office, same shiny suits, and said, I'm here for the job. Can I have it this time? And they said, you know what, it's really interesting you say that because most people after an interview don't ever ask for the job. They're like, okay, thank you, bye. But they don't ever say, can I have the job, right? And they're like, we're in sales. Like, if you don't ask for the business, you're not going to get it, right? But think about this. How scary is it to ask for something, even though you know you've earned it and you know you deserve it, but to actually make the ask, you're exposing yourself, right? You are saying, right now, I think I've earned what you have to give. May I please have it, right? And the thing is, when you present it in a way that it's in their best interest, it's a lot easier for them to say yes because they're saying yes based on what they get out of it, as opposed to what you do, right? For example, has anybody been on a first date in the past month? Anybody? A couple people? Okay. In the past 3 months? So no one dates in Monterrey? Is everyone already married? Okay, all right. So imagine needing the sale, right? So in sales, if you walk into a situation and you're presenting and you're talking about whether it's an interview or you're selling a product, and the other person can feel that you really need them to say yes, right? Like, they're not going to say yes, right? Because they're like, this is just, it's good for him, it's not good for me, right? So you have to present it in a way. In the same way that if a guy walks into a bar and needs to get laid, he's not going to get laid, right? Like, everybody can see the desperation on like swiping on every Tinder date. You're just like, oh my gosh, it's got to be this one. This might be this could be, no. Take a deep breath, it's going to be okay, right? And so I think that's one of the really interesting principles of sales is positioning yourself in a way where you've made it in their best interest to say yes, and they don't even think about the fact that you get some benefit out of it as well. And also putting yourself in a situation where where you have more than one person who could say yes in a sales situation. Because if you're, the only way that you're going to hit your number by the end of the month is if this one person says yes, and if they don't say yes, you're screwed. You're screwed, because they're probably not going to say yes, right? Risking it all on just one option, in my mind, never makes that much sense. And so jump into the cold calling billionaires and hanging out with celebrities and having a lot of fun, actually. And one of the things that we figured out was all the creative ways that we could get in touch with rich people, all the creative ways things that we could create that they couldn't create for themselves. So for example, this was back when the Jonas Brothers were big. Anybody a Jonas Brothers fan back in the day? Okay, I mean, I still am, but just, it's okay. So the Jonas Brothers were going on their world tour with Miley Cyrus and Jordan Sparks, and it was going to be this big, huge thing, and you couldn't get tickets. So our company offered to fly the Jonas Brothers around on private jets from each of the locations, as long as they would give us a 1-hour meet and greet before every show. And so I would call up my clients and I'd be like, hey, I know you've got a 9 and 11-year-old daughter. I've got backstage passes to the Jonas Brothers to hang out with them for an hour, and I've got floor seats on the first row. Would you and your daughters like to come? Oh, absolutely, yes we would. Great. I need you to wire the money and sign the contract, and then I will tell you how to get the tickets. And it worked. It always worked. And so, coming up with creative ways to provide value, and in a lot of ways, to create something that they couldn't create for themselves. All right? If you think about what's happening now with the sharing economy, right? It's access, not ownership, right? So many things is I want to be able to have access to a driver showing up whenever I push a button on my smartphone. I don't actually want to own a car. I haven't owned a car in 8 years. Right, because I live in Manhattan and I either walk everywhere or I just take a taxi or an Uber. And I think that trend is more and more the way you think about things. Airbnb, you think about the different cooking opportunities or the different adventure opportunities. A lot of those types of things, it's access, not ownership. And this was very early days for us, but that started to be the trend. So have a lot of fun, getting to meet some really cool people. And I was sitting down with my mentor, and a couple of years into this selling luxury and hanging out with rich people. And I was telling him about all these cool stories and these people that I met, and I knew the guys on the Dallas Cowboys and like all these things. And he goes, Andy, those are all pretty cool stories, but my limo driver can say the same thing. And I said, what? He said, look, you are not in the back of the limo hanging out with those guys. You're their service provider, and you're doing a great job as a service provider, but you're still pretty early on in your career. I think you should take some personal risk and try and get to the next level, because otherwise you're always just going to be the guy that they call when they need something, not the guy that they call when they want to start something new or partner or something along those lines. They know that you're good at selling them things. They don't know that you're good at creating companies or doing the things that get you into the back of the limo. And I said, well, I don't know if I'm good at those things. He says, well, there's only one way to find out. So I decided that in order for me to really take that personal risk to kind of punch through, because I was pretty comfortable, right? I mean, literally very comfortable and really enjoying my job. But looking back on it, I think the saying goes that there's no comfort in the growth zone, and there's no growth in the comfort zone. It's really, really hard to push yourself to go do new things if you're comfortable, right? You have to find ways to make yourself uncomfortable and to do things that kind of push you further away from sleeping well at night in order to kind of push and get to the boundaries of things. Two of the most addictive things in the world are cocaine and a monthly paycheck, right? Monthly paycheck is really, really hard to break free from, right? If you have a consistent monthly paycheck, you're like, I'm not leaving that. That's great. It shows up whatever I need it to, right? And I think that's one of the things that I think that I look at a lot of the people that I get the chance to work with now, a lot of the entrepreneurs that I work with, that was one of the first things that they had to break through, was being addicted to the comfort. Because you're trying to do something nobody else has ever done, otherwise why do it? And so decided that in order for me to really pull that off, in order for me to really do a good job, I needed to move to New York City. Texas was great, it's where I grew up. I loved everything about my growing up experience, but if I really wanted to take it to the next level, I needed to go play in a much bigger stage. And so when I got to New York City, one of the first things I realized was everyone in New York City thought the same thing. Didn't matter where they came from, they thought, I need to go to New York to become the best that I can be. Because New York's nuts. New York is, for most people, a horrible place to live. But if you're crazy, it's awesome. It's fantastic, because you're surrounded by a bunch of other crazy people. And in Texas, where I grew up, if you're in the top 10% of your high school, you get automatic admission to the state schools. Texas A&M, University of Texas, Texas Tech. And so when you get to those universities, you're surrounded by a bunch of other people who are top 10% in their high school. And you learn pretty quickly, you can just step up if you want to become top 10% at A&M. I feel like the same thing is true with New York City. That when you get to New York, you need to learn to step up pretty quickly if you want to stand out. Because there's so many people there that are fighting and doing their best to try and do things that nobody else has ever done before. So quit my job, sent out my going away party invites, packed up the U-Haul with my then girlfriend, and we drove to New York City. No job, no apartment, just we're going to show up and we're going to figure it out. That was dumb, but it ended up working out okay. And because when we were driving about day 2, I got a phone call from my junior high best friend. So we met in 1991, and this is late 2007, 2008. And he goes, I didn't realize you were a free agent. I'm working on a new startup. I would love to have you come in and run business development. And I said, well, I love your new startup. I'm a user of it. Really enjoy what you guys are building. But I have one question. What's business development? And he goes, biz dev. It's what we say in the startup world so that we don't say sales, because we're all afraid of sales guys. I was like, okay, that's fair. So jump in, join this company. We raise money from Sean Parker and Founders Fund. Then we go out and raise a lot more money from some other really great venture capitalists. And the company was called Gowalla, and it was a location-based social network. So it was back when you first could turn on location services on your phone to be able to find out what was around you. And ended up running that company for a couple years, and then being fortunate enough to sell to Facebook at the end of 2011. Selling to Facebook at the end of 2011 was cool because that was before they went public. And so being able to get a lot of our investors got pre-IPO shares. They were all very happy with us. A lot of our employees moved out to San Francisco. Very fun. We did have 2 employees that said, I don't want to work for Facebook. So they turned down their offers, and they went to work for this other startup that some of you probably have heard of called Instagram. And so they joined Instagram in December of 2011, and then in May of 2012, Instagram got bought by Facebook, And so then they had to go work for Facebook. And so they got bought by Facebook twice in 6 months, which was good for them, very good for them actually. And so that was a fun first experience. And most of the time, first startup, you don't, it doesn't work quite that well. But then going back to kind of the reputation that we built at Gowalla, I was the single, no kids member of the management team. So I flew everywhere, and they sent me out to conferences, and they asked me to go speak, and they asked me to go do anything and everything I could to be in front of the right people at the right time so that we could continue to build the company. And in that process, I got to know a lot of other people in the industry. And when they found out that I was not going to go work at Facebook, they said, one of those people gave me a phone call and said, hey, would you ever consider coming to work for us? And that company was a company called Waze. And so that was a fun phone call to get. Waze had just decided that they were going to expand from Israel, where it was founded, to move to open a headquarters in San Francisco. And then they were talking about opening an office in New York. And so I opened the New York office for Waze, and it was a pretty fun rocket ship to hop on. It was less than 2 years after I joined that we sold to Google. But during those 2 years, we had what we now call Tim Cook Day. Everybody know who Tim Cook is? CEO of Apple, right? So in 2012, October 27th specifically, Tim Cook hopped on stage at the Apple conference and said, you guys, we were trying to build this thing called Apple Maps. Anybody remember Apple Maps? In the first 6 months, it was horrible, right? It was really, really, really bad. It was just the worst. And so he was kind of up on stage apologizing for Apple Maps. And he says, look, it's hard to build a map. It's really hard to get it right. It's hard to get all the place data. It's really hard to know which locations you should go to. It's hard to map from one place to the next. Sorry, we tried to build it from scratch. We didn't do the best job that we could. In the meantime, use Waze. Now, at this point, there's 20 million, 30 million, 40 million people watching the live stream, right? And at that point, Waze had about 16, 17 million users, and we got 3 million downloads in one day, right? So all of a sudden, we're at 20, and then we're at 30, and then we're at 40, and we're 50, and then when we sold, we had 60 million users worldwide. And it was, this was maybe one of the most poignant examples of when you're good at something, you tell other people. But when you're great at something, other people talk about it for you, right? And that was when I saw it, because we didn't ask him to say that, right? We weren't pitching him like, hey, we'll give you some shares in the company if you talk about us on stage. No, it just so happened that he saw that we were really good at what we did and made us great, right? And so that really was the rocket ship that I hopped on. I was very fortunate to be there at the right time. We just kind of blew through the roof, between flying to Israel all the time, flying to San Francisco all the time, and sometimes sleeping in New York City. I had a great time with that company. I got really good status on a lot of different airlines, so that I could sometimes get upgrades. But startup budget, you have to book whatever the cheapest flight is. But with Waze, there was this idea of how do you leverage a crowd to give yourself data that you can use to make the crowd have a better experience, right? So just by driving with Waze, you're feeding data back into the system that then makes everyone else's experience better. That's a pretty interesting thing, right? When you are contributing information and then consuming information at the same time, and it's a virtuous cycle. And so when Waze sold, I had been talking with an entrepreneur in Washington, D.C., who was asking another similarly big question. The big question with Waze was, how do we solve traffic together, right? We're a community of people that hate traffic, right? I used to say that if traffic had a Facebook page, no one would like it, right? Like there's not a single person in the world who even in a sadistic, capitalistic way benefits from traffic. It's bad for literally everyone, right? There's not even a kind of good way that you can make money off of traffic. Except for selling to Google for $1 billion, but that's different. So his question was, father of 3, and got a box from Amazon and diapers.com sent to his house, every week. And he was wondering, he's like, am I paying the best price for these things that I just get that just show up at my door? I know what it costs online, but if I went to my local grocery store, how much would it cost? And so that was the question that kind of kicked off, what is now my company Basket. So we started to ask this question that if I could know the price and peek into a local grocery store before I went, could I save money? And so we started to write down prices at different grocery stores, and we started to crowdsource this information. And we got to the point where we're like, yeah, you know what? There's a difference of about 30% from one store to the next store based on what's on sale this week and who's running specials on different products. But there's no way as a consumer for me to be able to search and look for that. Right? If you look at the housing industry, you've got Zillow and Trulia. If you look at the auto industry, you've got autotrader.com, cars.com, TrueCar. Maybe most, for me, the most used example would be travel, right? Kayak, Expedia, Orbitz, all these sites that aggregate information around your interest or your demand before you make your purchase. But grocery, which is the fourth largest line item in most households, right? Paying for your house, paying for your car, paying for travel, and then paying for groceries every year is the fourth most expensive part of living. There was nothing that could be helpful. And so we went to a couple retailers. We went to the Walmarts, and we went to Target, and we went to Kroger, and all the different retailers that were out there. And we said, hey, we've got this great idea. We want to put your prices next to everyone else's prices, and then let consumers see before they go to your store which one has the best price. And they all told us not pleasant things. They said, that sounds horrible. Why would we ever do that? Like, we try and get people into the store based on one price, and then, oh, by the way, they just buy everything else while they're there. They didn't actually say that, but that's true. And so we said, okay, well, fine. How are we going to get all the prices if we can't get a data feed, right? And so then this is where kind of the experience with Waze came in, right? Of kind of saying, okay, what did we learn with Waze that we could then translate potentially into another industry, right? And so that was kind of what prompted it and kind of got it started. So we launched a fake startup. We said, we can't just go out and tell everyone what we're doing, right? We need to come up with a creative way to get the information that we want without necessarily tipping our hand to everybody with what we're going to do with all the information once we have it. So we launched a game called Stock Up, where you could go into a store, pull out your phone, start scanning different items in the store using the barcode. And when you were scanning the barcode, you take a photo of the product and tell us how much it cost at that store. And we would give you points. And you could trade those points in for money at the end of every month. And we had people that were making $10 to $12 an hour, literally walking down the aisle, scanning 500 products every hour. And we're like, oh my gosh, this is working. And so we built a database of 900,000 unique products, right? So not just Diet Coke, but Diet Coke in every size can, every size bottle, every size 2 liter, 3 liter, 1 liter, all of them. And we've started to find this really passionate community of people that loved the pricing transparency that they were figuring out while out there scanning. In fact, we had one woman who she was making $15 an hour. And like consistently $15 an hour, and like no one else was close. Like some people would get to 12, but no one ever got to 13 or 14. And she was making $15 an hour. She was in Seattle, and all of her data was right. And we couldn't figure out. We were like she's got to be cheating, but we don't know how. So I was in Seattle for meetings with Amazon and Costco, and I hosted a meetup for all of our moderators, and I made sure she came. And I said, you know, I got to tell you, you're one of our fastest scanners. Like, what's your secret? She goes, oh, it's simple. It's simple. I send my 9-year-old down the aisle, and she turns all the barcodes facing out. And then I scan them, and I don't have to touch the product. And my 6-year-old turns them all back. And I was like, is that child labor? Are we good? Okay, all right. So they ended up working out okay, but it was like early hustle and entrepreneurship. I was like, this is great. So we started to find this passionate community of people that were contributing prices. We had about 40,000 people across the U.S. inside of stores on a weekly basis. And the retailers started to kind of figure out what was going on. So I had a big meeting with one of the big grocery stores in the U.S., and the chief information officer said, he goes, okay, basically I can't stop you. Is that right? I was like, I mean, I'm sure you could come up. He goes, no. I would have to outlaw smartphones in my store to stop you. I was like, that's true. Yeah, sorry. But it was kind of one of those, boundaries of forgiveness versus permission, right? And so we built this database. We had 900,000 products, 165,000 stores, and we now have over 1 billion prices live inside of our app. And so we shut down Stock Up and launched Basket in January. And what Basket is it's a smart shopping list. If you give me this week's grocery list, I will tell you every store within 5 miles that carries all those products and what the total price for your basket of goods is, so that you can know before you go whether you should turn right or turn left at the intersection. And so what we've found is there's a lot of the innovation that's been happening in Silicon Valley, that's been happening around grocery and retail, has really been focused on, for a very certain segment of the market, which is people who have more money than they have time. People who say, I don't care how much it costs, just get it to me. Right? All the food delivery services, all of the ride-sharing services, it's like literally like, okay, sure, charge me $28 for my soy latte. Whatever, give me my soy latte. Right? But then on the other end of the segment is people that don't have much money, but they have a lot of time. Right? And those might be, you might consider those people that clip coupons, the people that like are, master hoarders. They stock up on 30 boxes of cereal at a time, and they've rigged the game, for them. But really kind of the focus that we're going after is people that don't feel like they have much time or money, right? People that feel like that there's a trade-off that they have to make. And so with Basket, when we give you back the list of stores that carry all your products, you can either sort by price or you can sort by distance. And so we want, I don't care which store you go to shop at, just like with Waze, we didn't care which route you drove. But what we wanted you to do is we wanted you to start that process with us, because there's a lot of interesting information that we can gather around trends and around different types of products, different types of stores. And so that's been a really fun project for us. CNN just wrote a big article about us saying that it's the grocery app for the 99%, which I thought, I was like, that's a great headline. I wish I would have written that. And that, so it's been really fun. So we're still really early, we're still really young. We're about 11 people right now, but we have about 100,000 users just so far this year. And we've got some big partnerships that we're gonna roll out here in the next few months. With Uber and a couple of big retailers. And so that kind of, that's a little bit of the zoom through, my career. But when I was thinking specifically about this event, I kind of rewound a little bit to what I said about when I was selling life insurance, owning which parts of things that you can control. When they told me if I'd be smart enough to be dumb enough to do exactly what they told me to do, they said, here's your formula. 10, 3, 1. I said, okay, tell me more. They said, okay, if you get 10 leads, you will have the opportunity to make 3 pitches. And if you make 3 pitches, 1 person will say yes. So 10 leads gets you 1 deal. Cool. All right, so let's do the math. If I want to have 120 deals in my first year, that means I need to give how many pitches? 360, right? And if I give 360 pitches, how many leads do I need total? 1,200, okay? So 1,200 leads is what I need if I want to get 120 deals. And 120 deals was my target for being number 1 in the US. So I said, all right, let's think about what I control. Of the 3 people that I pitch, 1 of them says yes. Do I control who says yes? No, right? I don't know which of the 3 are going to say yes and which ones are going to say no. So I don't control that. Okay, of the 10 leads, do I control which ones are going to let me pitch? No, like even worse odds, because 7 people out of that 10 are going to say no. So for the 10 leads, do I control getting 10 new leads this week? Yeah, I do, actually, right? That's the only thing that I can control. Like in the process, everything else is just numbers flowing through a funnel, but this is what I can control. So I said, okay, if that's what I can control, that means I need 120 leads for the year, means 100 every month, right? 100 every month means 25 every week, and 25 every week means 5 a day if I don't want to work weekends. Great. So 5 a day, 25 a week, 100 a month, I'll be number 1 in the US. I was like, that's naive, but maybe it'll work. So it starts to work, right? And I just commit to it. I commit hardcore, 25 leads a week. I'm gonna make it happen. About 6 or 7 months in, it's Friday afternoon, 6:30 p.m. My buddies have all already headed off to watch a sports game or at a bar. And they're like, Andy, hurry up, like, leave the office. I was like, I only have 24 leads. maybe I can let it slide this week. Nope. No, not if I want to win, right? Not if I want to get the thing that I said I was going to go get. So I don't really know where I'm going to find one more lead, right? Because it's 6:30, nobody's working. And so I was thinking, I was like, have I asked my friends? Like, who else, right? So I call my college roommate, who's studying at the University of Arkansas, and I say, Eric, I need one more lead for the week. Do you know anyone who's smart, anyone who's recently moved to Dallas, anyone who's starting a new company? Like, one more. And he says, oh yeah, actually, yeah, I do. There's this guy, he was really involved at the school. He just started a new company in Dallas. Like, here's his name and number. Yes, got my 25th lead. That guy's name is Skinner Lane, and went out, met with him. He ended up becoming one of my clients, and then eventually became one of my friends. And during that process, he ended up taking his company public when he was 24, 25 years old. Very, very smart. This was back 2006, 2007. And he came to me at the end of 2007, and he said, Andy, like, just heads up, the US stock market's not going to be very good in 2008 and 2009. I was like, what? He goes, yeah, I just have this, I have a hunch. And so he sold his company, like, got out, and he moved to South America. And just said, like, I think the US, North America is not going to be quite what I want, but I'm going to go to Chile. We'll see what happens. I was like, okay. Like, and then it turned out he was correct. He gets down to Chile, and just after we'd sold Waze, he and I started asking each other a bunch of questions. We're like, hey, if you were going to go back when you were 18, what advice would you give yourself about college? Well, if you were going to go back when you were 22, what advice would you give yourself about your first job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Because we were both had just turned 30, and we were asking each other these questions. And we said, like, these are questions that, like, I've started to ask other people, and they resonate with a lot of other people. A lot of other people are saying, that's actually a really interesting question. And so we put together a curriculum that was about an 8-week curriculum about entrepreneurship, community, and personal self-development. And so we used that curriculum that we put together to launch and to create Exosphere. And so Exosphere is now based in Florianópolis, Brazil. We've had 1,200 students come through the program over the past 3.5 years from 54 different countries. And we focus on the core curriculum of entrepreneurial principles, and then we dive deep into things like artificial intelligence, drone races, we're doing some biohacking, we do web development, design, things along those lines. And so it's turned into this pretty amazing thing that we're working with a lot of different governments, a lot of different universities, and then a lot of just great entrepreneurs from around the world. And so I tell you that story, and I'm closing with that story, because I want to go back to that boundary, the boundary that we wanted to break about things that you can control. Because I went and got one more lead in 2006, so 10 years ago, right? I got one more lead. I met a guy named Skinner Lane, who's now been my business partner for 10 years, who we helped found Exosphere together. And because of founding Exosphere together, had the privilege of meeting Rocio when she came and was one of our students. And so because I got one more lead on a Friday afternoon 10 years ago, I'm standing here today. And that's what happens when you choose to break through all the boundaries. That's what happens when you choose to own what you can control and just keep going, even when everybody else is saying, no, just come meet us at the bar. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Because you have to be that determined to do things like that, because then you never know what options are going to pop up next. Right? People ask me, why do I hustle as hard as I do? Right? They're like, dude, you're always going. Like, you're always hustling. Like, why? I said, because the harder I work, the luckier I get. Right? The more opportunities I put myself out there, the more opportunities that present themselves to me. The options that I have because of the work that I do gives me a lot of different, I can make choices. I can do want-tos instead of have-tos. And when I have those options, for me, having options is the truest definition of wealth. Right? That's something I learned from a lot of my private jet clients, was they didn't view money in their bank account as a way to keep score. They viewed it as a way to have more options than other people. If they decided that they wanted to fly to California to see their son play a basketball game, they could. Right? They had the option, just snap their fingers and a jet showed up because they'd worked hard somewhere else. And so those options that create that wealth is more or less freedom, right? It's the freedom to do the things that you want to do instead of the things you have to do. So wrap it all up, I hustled this hard to create options, which is my definition of wealth. So I hustle to create freedom for myself and for the people around me. And so with that, I want to encourage you guys, think through what are the things that you have, what are the things that you've slowed down? What are the things that are slowing you down that either you've put there or that other people have put there? The expectations of others, whether it's parents, loved ones, friends, whatever it might be. Because those are things that can get in the way of you doing the thing that probably you alone are capable of doing in this world. Your background, your relationships, where you are, the things that interest you are all very unique to you. And it would be a shame, I think, to have things that can be taken out of your way, boundaries that can be broken, to be things that would stop you from bringing that gift to everyone else. And so with that, I want to thank you all so much for the time and letting me come down and visit Monterrey this week.